This PSA was brought to you by the Peter G Show.
You may have second thoughts after the show.
Don't drink the positive.
We're really talented. We should get Oscars.
Just pick out a car, for Christ's sake.
No, my name is Peter.
Yeah, I want.
Here's good.
Yeah.
Madam Perry.
I need to get back in the genie bottle.
Louis from Pennsylvania, you're on.
He likes it. It's showtime.
Peter G Show, Peter G Show, divorced dad, single dad, divorced dad, single dad, Peter G Show.
It's showtime. Finally. Sorry. Had to go to the bathroom. Thank you. Thank you. I started off thinking it was going to go easy, but then, I don't know, everything just kind of came to fruition. Oh, boy. Oh, boy. I might have to go again. I don't know. I knew I shouldn't have stopped at Taco Bell on the way in here. Oh, boy. Okay, listen. Better late than never. At least we made it here. I gotta have a long talk with myself when I start after this show is over, because I must have hit the sauce a little too hard and too early this morning, because I knew Pepsi was going to be back today. So that was basically it. Anyway, listen. It's Wednesday. Happy Wednesday. Hope everybody's doing really, really good, because it's a wonderful day in the Peter G Show neighborhood right here. Everybody take a deep breath. Great show tonight. Great topic. Great show tonight. If it wasn't for this style of topic and this subject matter that we're going to talk about tonight, I wouldn't have ever started a show. I mean, even though we branched out and got, into a lot more broader categories and things like that, but tonight's going to be a big deal for me anyway, because it hits close to home, because I'm an advocate for this as well as many of you know. Divorce and children. Tonight, Joey Pontarelli, he's got a book. It's Not Your Fault. It's a practical guide to navigating the pain and problems from your parents' divorce. It's not your fault. Talk to your parents. This is a guide, like a handbook, and we're going to talk about it. And I think both children and adults need to read this, or grown-up adults, or grown-up children. It's not a child's book, but lots of good stuff. We're going to be talking to him in a few minutes. I suggest you grab your popcorn, grab your adult beverage, just grab something and have a seat, because you're going to want to pay attention. Okay. I want to also remind you, sorry, it's just, I don't like being late, but I was late. Doesn't happen very often, but it did tonight. Problem is, you can't really start the show without me, can you? Well, I mean, you can. I can put Pepsi in charge. In fact, one day we should do that. I'll just say, Pepsi, I'll be right back, and see what happens. A social experiment, because you'd be surprised. You'd think that, how hard can it be to talk for an hour or kind of entertain for an hour, and then in about a minute and a half of getting into it, it's like, what do I do now? I don't know what to do. And then you get real quiet, and then it's like, but don't worry, because I'm here. So I also want to remind you real quick before we get going, just, a few PSAs. I love that you guys watch the show, and I appreciate it. And I want you to share. But if you can't watch the show, I want you to Google Peter G Show podcast. Take it with you in the car. Any way of listening and watching is a good way, because although I like the visual format better than the podcast, but there's still a lot of great stuff to be learned. And if you, put an earbud in while you're at work, because who the hell wants to be at work, listen to something interesting, this is the place to go. So Google Peter G Show podcast and take it on the road with you. Take it in the car. wherever. Take it while you're in the park, while you're working out. Right, Pepsi? Working out. Yeah. Anyway, speaking of Pepsi, I think it's time we bring in Santa's little helper. He's been gravely missed, and I do mean grave. So here he is. Ladies and gentlemen, your friend to the show and our almost consistently appearing appearance, Mr. Pepsi. How you doing?
Hey, how you doing? It's the Peter G Show.
Yes, it is. It almost wasn't.
Things happen.
Yes.
Things happen.
I needed to check that note that I had in my pocket. Check.
Break a leg.
Yeah, check to see that you have all your go live features on. Oh yeah, that's a first.
It's all good.
Yeah, is it? So
good
how the hell are you? Well, I'd love to say the same. No, it's been mighty quiet around here for the past few weeks. Glad you made it back alive. And
oh my goodness,
how was rehab?
Almost didn't make it back alive.
Really?
Yeah. But you know.
So I've been told.
Things worked out though.
Yeah.
So salute. Anyway, things worked out. So
yeah, here's the living to tell about it. Yes.
Good to be back. Back.
Yes, I do believe that a refresher course of rehab is good for you every once in a while.
But speaking of that, so is the subject matter on tonight's show. I mean, you're right. I mean, if it hadn't have been for this topic, then who knows? The Peter G Show never would have been the Peter G Show.
You are absolutely correct. There would have been no show because I started this from bitching about divorce for so long, and finding out that so many people were going through it. And then I decided to start talking about it. So as we get closer to the holidays, I like to start going into more of this because the holidays are even tougher, as if it wasn't tough enough. The holidays, it gets tougher when, all those holidays come around that are so emotional. And so we're starting off now. It's been kind of hard getting Joey on. He's busy doing his thing, but I got him and he's going to be on momentarily. And that's going to be a great thing.
Great.
Is there anything you need to say or anything, Pepsi, while we're here?
Just great to be back. Who loves you, baby?
All right. Well, there's something I want to tell you. Okay.
Okay. Talk to me.
Well, when I was 5, I was riding my bike and I fell off and I skinned my knee up really, really bad.
My knee.
The reason I'm telling you this now is because no. Well, yeah, that too. The reason I'm telling you this now is because back then when I was 5 and I fell off my bike and skinned my knee, there wasn't social media.
Exactly. Did you have a helmet on? Peter?
Dude, they didn't have helmets back then.
That's what I'm asking. Yeah. Okay,
thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
But the reason is, though, I couldn't tell you this because we didn't have social media. So I'm telling you now because it was I felt I needed to tell you this. Okay.
I think when I was 5, I did something that I can't even confess. Here on the show, probably would be in apropos, but I kind of went to the bathroom probably in my bed. So maybe kind of like what happened right before the show. I don't know, but anyway.
All right,
when I was 5, there was no social media.
Yeah, no, that's good. All right, well, you know what? We'll do that next week because next week it's you and me.
Oh.
Speaking of right now, we're living in the here and now. So I'm going to let you go, and so I can bring Joey in, and then we'll talk about this. There you go. Wireless. I like it.
Yeah. Gotta go punch buttons. Yeah. Gotta go punch buttons
or something. All right. Good job. All right. I'll talk to you in a minute. Back in the saddle. All right. Sorry. I just had to get that off my chest. But, once in a while, there's just things I just feel like I need to talk about real quick. Speaking of talk about, I am happy to tell you right now that coming on in just 30 seconds or less, I'm bringing on author and podcaster, Joey Pontarelli. This book, It's Not Your Fault. We're going to talk about this, children and divorce, and he's going to get into deep detail. So I think without further ado, I am going to bring him in. Joey, you ready to shake your head for me? I think he should. I think that was a yes, or he sneezed, one or the other. But ladies and gentlemen, new friend of the show, and I'm really glad because we've been going back and forth for seems like countless months. But I finally got him on, and the minute I met him, I said, I know that this was destined to be. So, ladies and gentlemen, Joey Pontarelli.
Peter, great to be with you, man. Thanks so much for your persistence, and honor to be on the show.
Thank you. I apologize for the delay. I don't like keeping people waiting, but
It happens to the best of us.
Yeah, we had stuff going on. So Joey, it's like Joey is such an East Coast name for me because when I was a child, I did grow up in the East Coast until I was 15, and I was surrounded by Italians, and it was like it wasn't just Joey; it was like Joey Gagoots, or Joey Mamone. I mean, they always had a nickname. You don't have a nickname or nothing like that?
Just Joey. Yeah, we. I guess in sports, people call my siblings and I Pont.
Yeah,
because my last name's Pontarelli, so they would shorten it a little bit. But yeah, I've always just been a Joey, not a Joe, not a Joseph, just Joey.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't know. Like I said, it brings back a lot of memories because everybody over there was like Joey Linguini, or Joey Limp Leg, whatever it was. It was always some kind of Joey, but it wasn't just Joey. But we're gonna leave it at that because you got a book. You got a book, and when I found out about all this, and first of all, I'm going to tell you that I think you already sold a couple of copies of this book just from when I told people about this book coming on, because the show's own general surgeon, the show has a personal general surgeon, and I spoke to her last night, and she told me that she ordered your book already, and I didn't even know it. She didn't tell me. So good
Thank
deal.
you so much. Yeah, I should be paying you royalties.
No. Here's the thing: the royalties are the gift that keeps on giving about what we're doing for this show.
Yeah.
I want to say number one, because we'll get into the book. I mean, about buying the book and all that, but it's not expensive. This book is really affordable. I saw it on Amazon. I mean, it's like $8 for this book. It's like you can't buy books for that, but yet you can. So I was shocked because she said she bought it. She said it was very inexpensive, and she's already gone through half of it, and she said it's a good book. She said she felt she needed to read it because she's going through some stuff, and possibly give it to her child.
Beautiful. I'm honored to hear that. And yeah, I think Amazon's running a sale at the recording right now. I don't know if it will be when everyone's
okay. Well, either way, whatever the case was, so then people go and buy it right now, But I said we'd talk about that later, but I just couldn't help it because I was shocked because most of the books average about $20 to $25, 16, 20, 25. And I'm going, holy crap, it was a sale. There was something going on, so maybe that's even better of an incentive. But let's start from the beginning. Let's go to you. Why don't you take a minute and tell everybody a little bit about yourself and what you do, and how long you've been doing it, and what prompted you to write this book, and and be in the position that you're in right now and doing what you do. Why don't you just give everybody a hello and all about that?
Yeah, like I said, honored to be with you. It really goes back to when I was 11 years old. My mom sat me and my siblings down, and she broke the news that her and dad were getting a divorce. Dad would no longer be living with us. And it was absolutely devastating. It came out of the blue for my siblings and me. And so my world just shattered that day. And as an 11-year-old boy, I didn't know what to do with that news. And so I just sat in the closet and I cried. And sitting there in that closet, I felt abandoned. I felt unwanted. I felt like I just wasn't good enough. And in the days that followed, I dealt with a lot of pain and a lot of problems. I dealt with emotional issues, whether that was depression, anxiety, loneliness, a lot of anger for me personally. I fell into bad habits, like pornography became my way of coping. It became a real problem in my life. And then finally, I also dealt with relationship struggles, and research shows that's the biggest area affected by your parents' divorce, at least for us, the children. And so over the years, whether it was struggles in trusting, being vulnerable, failed relationships, or just even doubting that love and marriage can last. And so after years of just wrestling with this stuff, I looked around and I saw that my siblings were really struggling with the effects of the breakdown of my parents' marriage. I saw close friends of mine who were going through their parents' divorce and how they were struggling, often in serious ways. And then I started reading the research and realizing this is a huge problem. Like, one of the facts a lot of people don't know is that each year, over 1 million American children go through their parents' divorce. And the U.S. Census says that. And they qualify a child as anyone 17 and younger. Every year, 1 million more children added to that stat. There's tens of millions of us walking around right now. And so after years of just seeing this problem, I started a nonprofit. It's called Restored, and we help teenagers and young adults specifically to heal and grow from the trauma of their parents' divorce or broken marriage so they can feel whole again and ultimately break the cycle of dysfunction and divorce in their own lives. One of the main things we do is produce content, like the book. We have a podcast. I'll talk about all that stuff later. But we produce content that makes healing simple so people actually do it.
Wow. Okay. But I get it, because I, didn't realize, you don't realize things unless it affects you. That's one thing that I've really learned, when it comes to all kinds of issues. That's why everybody thinks they got a personal problem going on. It's not just you. There's many of them. And then when you start talking about it, if you decide to start talking about it, you find out that, wow, check out all these people that are going through the same thing. And I find for everyone that's healing, there's 4 or 5 coming through the door when it comes to divorce and single parenting, or divorce, period. And when you got kids involved, the biggest thing that I saw, because my daughter was very young, she was 3 or 4, and the last thing you want to do is screw up their heads. At least most conscious people do. But there's a lot of people that unintentionally, unknowingly, and just don't have a clue how badly they're screwing up their kids by doing what they're doing, and they think that no harm is coming from it. You said you're living proof of the whole thing. I mean, it obviously affected you. I mean, are you talking to the adults, or are you talking to the kids about this stuff?
Yeah, great question. We talk to both. Our primary audience are teenagers and young adults. So we say anyone 13 to 30 or so who they come from a broken family, whether their parents are divorced, separated, or maybe just there's a lot of dysfunction at home. There's a lot of problems at home. And so we're serving them primarily, but kind of secondarily, we're serving anyone who loves or leads them, whether that's a parent, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a spouse, a friend, a relative, or maybe even a coach, a teacher, a pastor, anyone like that. We're trying to help them help the young people that we're trying to serve as well. And to your point, Peter, I totally agree that a lot of parents are just unaware of the research out there. They're unaware of how their children are affected by the breakdown of their marriage and by their divorce. And I've never met a parent who got divorced in order to hurt their children. It sounds silly. No parent does that. But so often they're just unaware of the hurt that is inflicted on their kids by the situation. So I hope tonight we can shed a little light on this and give some insight and hopefully some advice on how they can help their kids cope and heal from all the trauma they've endured.
Let me tell you, number one, I just saw another post from Michael Schwartz. He just bought your book just now. So, I mean, it's like,
thanks, Michael.
Yes, he's a super fan, and I love him for paying attention. But again, I believe that in his life, he's got some of this going on too, and knowledge is power. But here's the thing, I know that there's a lot of parents that will go, you just lose it. This divorce and the path it takes you down, depending, I don't know of many amicable divorces. There are a few, but they're not many. So it will lead parents to do stupid things to themselves, drink yourself under the table, drugs. Just talking too much in front of your kids that don't understand. And this is where all the shit flows downhill. And it's all feeding into their little ears. And you think that even when they're really small, I didn't know what was worse. Go through a divorce when your children are teenagers because you're screwing up their life, or going through a divorce when they're real little, when you think you need to be there the most. So what do you think is does the most damage to kids? Real young or middle teenagers and stuff?
Yeah, it's a good question. The research that I've seen actually says that age isn't the most important variable. There's a lot of different variables that affect how much a child is impacted by their parents' divorce. So I've seen all sides of the spectrum anecdotally. I haven't, researched this officially, but I have a friend, for example, she was, I think, 6 months old when her parents divorced, and she's adapted very well. She still deals with challenges from that and from the family dynamic that she has to navigate, but she seems to be doing really well, thriving in life. And then I know other people where their parents divorced when they were a teenager in high school or maybe even college, and they're affected by it greatly. So you'd think the opposite, that the younger you are, the more it impacts you. But there's just a lot of different variables. And one of them actually is the quality of the relationship that you have with one or both parents. There was a study they did in Turkey on high school students, And basically what they found is that if a student who came from a divorced family, if they had a good relationship with one or both parents, they were much less likely to struggle with anxiety, depression, and loneliness. And so a lot of different variables, but researchers are, there's no clear indicator that age is the most important variable when it comes to that. And we've seen kind of evidence that younger and older can be affected in different ways.
I thought it would be a terrible thing for my child to be so young and go through it. But as I got old, now you just said that one child was only 6 months when they got divorced. See, they don't know anything different. They only know it the way it is. So in turn, I hope they have a good relationship with both parents. That's a whole nother issue about who wants to be there and who doesn't want to be there. But I do think that when you get to be a teenager, you're screwing up their world, because it's like, as if it's not hard enough for some teenagers to be a teenager. Just socially. I mean, I find out this stuff in my shows. I mean, I used to have a guy who used to call in, and I mean, his whole, I don't know what the hell was going on, but him growing up as a teenager and high schooler was just traumatizing to him.
Yeah.
And then you got your parents ripping out one of the anchors and just blowing your whole world apart. Stability.
Absolutely. And one of the interesting things that one of the researchers found, his name's Paul Amato. He's a sociologist at Penn State to this day. And he's done a ton of research on divorce and particularly on children. And interestingly, he found that the most impactful divorces on children, regardless of age, can be the ones that actually come out of the blue. That there wasn't a lot of overt conflict and fighting and dysfunction. Maybe there were some real problems, but they were mostly held under the surface. And then one day, mom or dad upped and left. And then the child was left thinking, like, my whole world was a lie. I thought this was stable. And then the next thing I know, dad's no longer living with us, mom's no longer living with us, and my whole life has changed. So there are obviously those situations. Just want to kind of get this out of the way. This always comes up where there's abuse or violence. Obviously, in those situations, there needs to be some sort of separation for safety. And so I know you would agree, Peter, that that's obviously important. The goal, of course, is to hopefully heal the marriage and bring the family back together. But obviously, we live in a very broken world, and that's not always possible. So there are some situations like those overt conflict and dysfunction situations to where the child could benefit, but it's still difficult on them. It's not like it's the greatest thing that ever happened if your parents get divorced, if there is abuse and things like that. It's just one problem on top of another.
I believe it. I mean, there are some marriages that do not need to be marriages, and I get that. And if there's abuse involved, well, obviously not. But I just think it rocks people's worlds, and sometimes you got a parent that doesn't want to be there, but the thing is they're going like, what the hell? And there are some people you said that just all of a sudden out of the blue that they keep really good secrets. Those are the ones that, like, the aunt and uncle or the niece got pregnant by the grandfather or something like that. Nobody ever told anybody, which doesn't happen a lot, but you hear those stories, and I don't know. It's very disturbing, and again, it's these kids are taking the blunt of it, and it sucks if that kind of stuff happens.
Yeah.
Want to ask you something here. Who do you find reaching out to you? I mean, like adults. I mean, now with Google and everything going on, I mean, you can pretty much Google things. And I found out last week that I asked a dietitian, and I said, how do people usually, find out what the problems they got? She goes, believe it or not, they Google everything. Kids are geniuses at their phones. I mean, are they reaching out to you, or, just like searching for resolution to these issues?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Probably the most popular way that people find us in particular is through the podcast. If you type in on Spotify, for example, Children of Divorce, we're basically the only show that shows up. Sadly, there's really nothing else out there like this. And so we get a lot of, the children, usually in college age or young adult years. So anywhere from like 18 to 30, that's kind of our sweet spot. We will get some high school kids reaching out, and then also parents or people who, like I mentioned, love or lead someone who comes from a broken family. So I've had teachers, I've had youth ministers, I've had just the whole gamut of people reaching out because they're like, hey, I have a student in my class who is, used to be a high performer, and then their parents got divorced and their grades just went down. They're failing to perform on their sports teams and so on. And so it really goes across the board. But the main people reaching out are those probably college age and young adults.
I get it. I mean, there's a lot of parents, unfortunately. I think there's because men used to think in divorce, they would get the wrong end of the stick, and like when it comes to custody and things like that. I think times are changing a lot, but there are a lot of men as well as women that they want a divorce. They got a new boyfriend or girlfriend right away, and like they're going, "I'm out. I got to live my life, and I'll see you when I see you." And that to me is like, what the hell? I mean, they need a real stiff talking to. And that's the kind of stuff that really upsets me a lot is like you brought these children into this world and now you're too busy, you got to go live your life. And I mean, to me, that seems to be one of the most damaging things. What do you find in your findings?
I totally agree. When one parent completely walks away and maybe even trades their original family for a new family or a new girlfriend, new boyfriend, it can be devastating, especially to the children, because as children, we look up to our parents for so many things. Obviously, our physical needs for food, for shelter, for clothes, for all that stuff, but also our emotional needs. There's so much there that we never talk about. That we need from our parents. And so if that's just ripped out of our lives, and what we see a lot is dad's usually the one who leaves the house, and that's really devastating on the children. And so it's absolutely heartbreaking when a parent just leaves and never talks to their kids. Again, I've talked to people who haven't talked to their dad for about 10 years. Just absolutely devastating. And so ideally, the mom and dad are both involved and that they're there with the kids and they have a relationship. And I agree that it can be so tempting to rebound, to go seek, some way of killing your pain. And some people do that through new relationships. And I totally get that. Like you mentioned before, Peter, divorce is a very painful thing to go through. And it makes sense to me that people act out and they react in all sorts of unhealthy ways. But the goal, of course, is always to hopefully channel those that frustration, that pain, and cope with them in healthy ways so they can be the best mom or dad for their children.
It saddens me that when I got adults that are acting worse than the kids, and the kids are more adult than the parents, and that's the stuff that pisses me off. I mean, I was a late bloomer when it came to having a child, and I just couldn't ever see it that way. But even though I think I fared pretty well, every once in a while something comes out of my daughter's mouth that she didn't like, and she was little, but they don't forget. There's little things that affect them, and they don't forget. I mean, they've gotten over it, hopefully, but they don't forget. And she was, things that I thought I was doing good that, she didn't agree with. I mean, she's entitled to her opinion. I mean, she loves her mother as much as she loves me too. But the problem is you got this division and now you're splitting the baby or the kids. And when you mentioned, I forgot all about people, men or women that marry into a different family and all of a sudden they become more, instilled in the new family. And the old family is just looking at it like, what the hell? What about me? And that's really sad. I get it, but it's just very sad.
I couldn't agree more.
You had mentioned something about the 3 pitfalls of this whole thing. Why don't you give me some examples? I mean, there's probably more than 3 pitfalls, but these are probably 3 really kick you right in the ass pitfalls. So why don't you enlighten me a little bit now? Because I was skimming through the book, but I know I'm missing parts, and that's why you're here.
No, happy to do it. Yeah, there's 3 common pitfalls we've seen that parents fall into when it comes to going through their own divorce or even in the aftermath of the divorce. Obviously, a lot of the challenges don't end with the legal proceedings themselves. So I'll go through each of them. And Peter, I'd love to hear your thoughts on them as well. The first one is bad mouthing. I experienced this myself with my parents. A lot of young people who reach out to us, who listen to our podcast, read the book, they share this with us as well. Mom or dad, out of frustration at their spouse, says bad things, mean things about their spouse to their kids. And usually it's done out of frustration. Sometimes, if we're honest, there's an attempt to maybe get the child to be on that parent's side. And so it can get real ugly real quick. And the one thing to remember here is that even if you feel like that person is no longer your spouse, and perhaps they're no longer legally your spouse either, they're still their mom or dad. And so it can be really hard as the child to hear these really horrible things said about your mom or your dad, because in a way they're part of you too. So if you attack your spouse, then in a way you're attacking your children too. So the solution here is pretty simple. Don't talk bad about your spouse in front of your kids. If you need to vent, which I get, go to a friend, a family member, a counselor, your lawyer, someone else. Just don't bring it to your kids, because again, it can wreak havoc on your relationship with them, and it will make them respect you less, which I know as parents, I'm a dad. I have a daughter who's 1, and she's the best thing ever. And I want her to look up to me. I want her to respect me. I want her to look at me as a role model. And so the way we act is important. So, just don't badmouth your kids. If you need to vent, go to a friend or someone else. But one tip on that, if you find yourself kind of going down that path, just take a step back, take a deep breath, and then ask yourself the question is, if one of my parents said this about the other parent, how would I feel about that? I found that's a good way to assess whether you should say what you're about to say.
I want to step back and on this. I want to go through piece by piece real quick, because you coming from a divorce, being a product of a child of divorce. I mean, you were the child from the divorce. I was the parent, the adult of a divorce, trying to keep it in you and trying not to explode when you're both. I don't want to say because everybody, she's got a side of her story. I got a side of mine. But the thing was, it was a living hell. Anger makes you do stupid things, really stupid things. And you just want to explode. I got to thank God every day for the handful of people that I would throw up all over. And even with that, including this one right here, he had to listen to it for years. Yeah. But I mean, I thank God for these people that let me spew, but even with them as support, you still blurt out things that maybe you shouldn't want. I wasn't as bad as a lot of people I know that do this, but things slip out, and that's when they hear things. Or because my ex had already been through a relationship with 2 children prior, and I remember her always saying, I never talk about their dad in front of the children. Well, here's what happened. Those children grew up, and now there was more combinations of not talking and or talking around my daughter than the first time, because the first time it was just the mother not saying stuff to other people. But when you got 2 other children who are growing up now and they're old enough to run their mouths too, and when they got it out for you, then it increases the combinations of sewage slipping into your child's ears, because you think they're not paying attention because they're watching TV, but they're like sponges, and that ear is listening to what they're saying.
It's a powerful analogy. I totally agree. And like I mentioned, as a child, you kind of feel attacked too, because that's your mom, that's your dad. And so it's hard not to separate yourself from them. And one thing that often comes up when this topic is discussed is that you might feel like there's things your child should know about your ex-spouse. And so in that situation, a mature parent can, in a calm way, communicate the facts, communicate the important information to the child without trying to tear down their spouse. And by doing that, and I'll touch on this a little bit later too, by doing that, your child's actually going to have more respect for you, not less.
Again, it's when you're in those moments.
Yeah.
Easy. I mean, you talked about things like taking a deep breath, before you speak, and things like that. Things I'm only learning years later, because you poked me, I barked. And then I learned that I'm giving too much satisfaction by replying to the other side. I mean, it's all water under the bridge for me now. And thank God, like I said, we survived it, and you will survive. But there's different levels of how much damage you have to do. I'd be walking in the store, Walmart or something, and your brain is just so you're thinking in your head of all this stuff while you're shopping, and I'd start talking out loud by myself, and all of a sudden I go, holy crap, and I look around to see if anybody's watching me. I know why homeless people talk to themselves. It's not that they're crazy. It's just that your head starts going so loudly that you lose track of your motor skills, and all of a sudden your mouth just starts opening up and talking out loud. It's not anything about being mental. It's just you're just in your own head, and your head starts getting vocal, and that's where everything gets really bad.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm a passionate person. I'm Italian, like you mentioned, and so I can certainly have a temper on me and get angry at times. I mean, we've all been in traffic when someone cuts you off, and it's not pretty what happens after. And so we've all been in that situation. It can be really difficult to control the way that you act. And One of the best books I've ever read is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl was an Austrian psychiatrist, a really profound man. Like, he was in a Nazi concentration camp. He survived, and lots of great things he wrote about and taught. And one of the things that he said is that we need to create a space between stimulus and response. And what he means by that essentially is when something happens that makes you feel something, there needs to be some sort of a pause, some sort of a space. In a way, it's like a long fuse. So then we can choose the response that aligns with our deepest held beliefs. And by doing that, we're going to end up living lives that are more void of regret and something that we can be proud of too. And it's not easy. Like, we all mess up. So I would give encouragement, like you've said, Peter, too. It's like, hey, if you've had a horrible track record with your kids up to now, then start again. And if you mess up next week, start again. And same thing next week. Like, try to make those incremental improvements. And in the end, you'll see a big result.
I see those people who weren't really good parents, like they're separated and they weren't really there. They were too busy going out and getting drunk or playing golf with their buddies, or I'm just saying men, or got a new girlfriend or boyfriend. But then they finally and they'd come around in between when they weren't doing anything. And no matter how awful they were still Superman or Superwoman to their kids, because they weren't around to do much wrong, like to be scolding them, to be, raising them properly. And, they just kind of came around when it was convenient. I'm not really hip to that too. I mean, time kind of heals all for most, not every, relationship. Some kids I've seen that they go, you know what, he's not my father. My stepdad is my dad. He was never there for me. I respect it. I understand. I understand, but I don't understand. But a lot of damage gets done. But most stuff, if you do keep trying, at least you're trying. And I found that, a lot of times you can get through it. And, so there was a lot of bumps in the road, but, here we are now. But I just think it's a shame for the people who have lost the time, like, especially when the kids are little. You can never get that time back. And so, you have no idea the greatness of life that you've missed out on raising your kids when they were little, like what you're getting ready to experience right now. I hated the fact that I had to leave my house when she was 3, and I made sure I was there for every second that I was allowed to be. We had 50-50, and that just to me was 50 too short.
I hear you, man. Man, that breaks my heart just to think of what you've gone through and how painful that must have been. And I can't imagine, like, I can't even fathom having, being ripped out of my daughter's life. So I hear you there, and it's devastating. And one of the things I want to, make sure that there's a message of hope, because a lot of this stuff is pretty heavy and dramatic, but there is hope. And parents, all you parents watching and listening, you play a huge role, really bigger than anyone else, in helping your children mitigate the negative effects from the divorce. And so if you're there and present in their lives, and you're investing in them, and you're not just, buying things for them, you're really spending time with them, you're getting to know them, you're trying to understand what makes them tick, you're trying to understand what's going on in their lives. If you invest in their lives and you love them in the way that they really long to be loved, even if they don't really say that, especially as teenagers, because we can just be idiots as teenagers, they really long for that. They desire your leadership, they desire your love. And so even if you feel so broken and so debilitated by the pain you've gone through, like, find it somewhere within yourself to just love those kids, to be there for them regardless of their age, because more than anyone else, you're going to impact the way that their life turns out, the trajectory of their life. And so you're needed, and there's a lot of hope. You can do a lot of good in helping your kids mitigate those negative effects that we're talking about today.
I would think that even if you're going through all this pain, the best feeling in the world is when you do get to spend time with your child.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not about the money. I talked about it a lot. I have many times where I bought her this big scooter. She played with the box the scooter came in. She loved the scooter, don't get me wrong, but she played with the box. I mean, it isn't about, I know people going through divorce and they feel guilty, and you're throwing money at them every time you're with them. It's about the time you spend with them. It's not just like, here, go play. Yeah. You need to be playing with them. And I mean, this is, to me, priceless. I would do it again if I could, and knowing that, it would work out the way it worked out for me. I mean, because again, it did work out between my child and myself, but a lot of people just got it all wrong. They're just thinking they're doing the right thing, and they're making some huge mistakes, like talking to their kids like they're their buddies, and they're really not. I mean, they're you got to they love each other and all that, but there's certain things you should say and certain things you should not say, as opposed to being with your buddies, things that you can say and not worry about.
Absolutely. And that's the next tip, actually. One of those 3 pitfalls I covered, number 1, which was bad mouthing. Number 2 is relying on your children for your emotional support. It's kind of a little bit of a variation of what you just said, Peter. But basically, what happens is when you go through a divorce, you have very real needs, very real emotional needs that your spouse was meant to fill, but obviously they're not filling them, and they won't fill them in the future. And so it can be really tempting for mom or dad, especially if the kids are at home, to then, often subconsciously, like parents aren't really aware of this, they begin relying on the children as if they were their spouse. And I'm not saying this is playing out in any physical ways. That can happen in some extreme cases, but it just plays out emotionally. And so you end up, like you said, sharing details that the kids don't really need to know, going to the child for your emotional support. And this typically falls on the older children as well. If you have a few kids, the oldest or maybe the second oldest will typically be the one to kind of fill that spouse role for you. And the problem with this is, in the moment, the child can feel like they're helping the parent, and the parent can feel some relief because they need help. They need someone in their life who they can vent to, who can fill those emotional needs for them. But what happens in the long run is that this really unhealthy dependency is formed between the child and the parent. And in the long run, it's just going to wreck the relationship. And there's psychologists who've done all these studies on this sort of thing. And in the end, it's going to just make for a lot of pain, and eventually it's going to have to break apart. And when it does, it isn't pretty.
I just think that you cannot hold all this stuff in. A lot of people don't have anybody to talk to, so then they start talking to the kids because they're right there at the time when they feel like spewing. Big mistake, number 1. I don't care what age they are. It's the worst mistake. You shouldn't be dumping on your kids. It's inevitable. I don't know about statistics either, but I'm pretty sure they're pretty high, because they just happen to be there, and you need to spew. And people need to let it off like a pressure cooker. You keep it all inside you. And again, that's how this show started originally, because people need to know that they need to have somebody to talk to. And a lot of people just won't talk to anybody. They want to keep it inside, and they're embarrassed, or I don't know what the thing is. It's like, you cannot be. You need to hope that you have a support group or somebody to lean on, or you're going to be a friggin' mess, period.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And if you can't find it in yourself to seek out help, to seek out a friend, to seek out someone who you can talk to for your own sake, do it for your children. Like seriously, relying on them in this unhealthy way is just going to damage your relationship. Maybe it's fine now and it even feels good on both ends. Like, again, you're venting, they're helping you in some way, but in the end, it just creates a really unhealthy dynamic. And I've seen this personally in, the young people that we serve. And so if you even need to pay for counseling, or maybe you can't afford counseling, you can just call up a friend, or, maybe if you're religious, talk to your pastor, talk to someone, at church, if you go to church. And if not, like, find a buddy at the gym, like ask them if you can go out for a beer. And just start small. If you're a little intimidated with this, you can just start small by opening up about, hey, going through this divorce, it's really painful and difficult. But in the long run, the effort and the money that you put into finding an alternative to talking about everything that you're going through is going to be totally worth it, because you will have a healthier relationship with your children.
I think the biggest problem is that people won't look to get this type of knowledge, especially if you're a first timer. If you're a first time divorce, I think, if I went through a divorce, God forbid, the second time around, I'd be much better at it than I was the first time, because it just blindsided me. Never been through it, never had those emotions, never had those feelings, didn't know how to deal with a lot of them. Again, thank God for me being able to spew all over my handful of friends that were willing to just let me listen, because I find a lot of families, when you're going to families with problems too, like the your mother, the adult's parents or the adult's sisters or brothers, they don't want to hear that shit. After a while, they go, don't answer the phone. I don't want to friggin' hear them. And that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's sad too, because they don't realize how much these people need to let it out. And it's just the way it is. I mean, there was a time, this is, believe it or not, technology, the Pepsi's already laughing. I can tell, because there was a time when we were texting back and forth. We would not talk. I still don't, unfortunately, don't talk to my ex. Shame on her. I don't care anymore. You know, everything's done. We're well past that, and we have a beautiful child, and we should be thankful. Period. But we'd be texting, and it was like texting, and it's like you know, blah blah blah, and you're texting, and I'd be telling Pepsi, "Go, she just sent me another text," and Pepsi would be like, "Text wars." He'd be singing to me, "Text wars." Because we're just going at it, one feeding the other one more gasoline, and you know, and it's all he said, she said crap until you finally get over it, and then finally it dwindles down. And I would start relaxing, thinking things were going to be okay, and then all of a sudden, more gasoline on the fire for some other issue, and it just goes. It's like a roller coaster. For depending, it could be months, it could be years.
Yeah, and I think part of the issue is that as a culture, we've normalized divorce. And so both on the child's end and the parents' end who are going through it, there's kind of this expectation that, well, this is really not an uncommon thing to go through. You'll be fine. Like, this is fine. It's for the best, whatever. And we throw around all these terms. And so if you as the parent feel hurt and you're struggling, people might look at you kind of odd because it's like, well, isn't this for the best? Aren't you happier? And there's this whole expectation. I know a young woman I interviewed on the podcast, she said that the day after her parents separated, she went to school. She was in high school at the time. She knew that her teachers and her classmates knew about what happened, and nobody said a thing. Now, in their defense, maybe they didn't know what to say, but from her point of view, everyone just acted like it was normal, like it was fine. And the effect it had on her was that she was looking at herself thinking, something wrong with me for feeling so hurt by my parents' marriage falling apart, by dad leaving. Maybe something's off with me, not with everyone else. And so I think that's part of the problem too, is that we don't treat divorce what it is, which is a trauma, both for the parents and for the children.
I don't understand some of these people. They have divorce parties like, yeah, I'm finally divorced. I mean, I think it's kind of childish. I really do. But it is kind of normal nowadays for kids to go to school. You don't have to be as embarrassed. When I was growing up as a kid, divorce was very minimal. And there were those few, but it was not a lot. And to be divorced, like, where's your dad? We're divorced. It just wasn't spoken of very much. Now it's casual, everyday stuff. It is the norm, sadly, because my parents argued like Fred and Ethel, cats and dogs that time. But then they brushed themselves off and move on, and they made it to almost 60 years. Now, granted, there was many times when I said, I don't know how the hell you guys or why you guys are married, but at the end, when they both got really old, it started showing. They started coming full circle again, but they hung in there. Now, some marriages, again, if it's abusive and this and that, you don't need to be there. But most people nowadays, you know, things are over money, stress. It's a lot, and all of a sudden, people go, you know what? Screw this, I'm out. They don't remember why they got married for, and try to get through those times till, you know, after about 100 years, everything levels out and it becomes good.
Yeah, no, marriage is not easy. I think it's important that we say that up front. There's also this cultural expectation, probably perpetuated by Hollywood, that if you find the right person, your love is going to be a fairy tale. It's going to look like The Notebook. Everything's going to be great. When the truth is messier than that, right? It's hard work. It doesn't, show up on your doorstep in a prime box, a great marriage. You need to work at it. I like to say it's more like farming. You have to really work hard before you see the fruit of your labors. And so I know that personally. My wife and I have been very open about going to counseling ourselves and trying to really work on our marriage. And we've had our own struggles, but we try to keep fighting through it, like you said. So it's interesting to see kind of how the culture has changed. And I think both the extreme of of divorce being something you never talk about, as well as being something so common that's kind of overlooked, is often unhealthy. But one stat that might be interesting to you and your listeners: there's one researcher who said that when it comes to those situations where there's abuse and violence, she said those account for about 30% of divorces, roughly 30%, a little bit under. And 70%, what she found in her research, are situations where there were low conflict, right? Maybe there were some real problems there, but mom and dad could have stayed married. They just chose to go their separate ways, either because ego was involved or there's some other issues that caused them not to be together. And so I'm not minimizing those 70%, but it's interesting to see that the far majority are not the situations where there's overt conflict and abuse and violence, where there is a necessity for some sort of separation.
Again, easier said than done. Most people will not be seeking this kind of information until long after they're going through it, and it's like one of those, I wish I would have known then what I know now, which happens in life a lot, unfortunately. But the thing is, it is out there, and here we are, and you're talking about it, and we are talking about it to put it out there because it is detrimental, I think, to a lot of people's health. Mental health, and which leads to physical health, and growing up, that kids are sponges. They're shaping them up. Those first 7-8 years are so important about how they're going to be as adults. And if you mess that up and you just let them do whatever they want to do, and because you're busy, you're going to have a handful down the road, and God knows, between the, what's going to happen. It's just not gonna. It might not be pretty.
Absolutely. A lot of emotional problems, behavioral problems, a lot of challenges in relationships. We're more likely as children of divorce to get divorced ourselves. We're less likely to get married. We're more likely to get divorced. And so you can see it plays out in different areas of life, these negative effects. And that doesn't mean if you come from a broken family, you're doomed to fail in everything you try to succeed at. You can overcome it, but you have to focus on healing and growing. And that's what we're here to provide as a nonprofit. We want to help people heal and grow, and we do that by just offering really simple tactics that they can use, or providing them resources that they can go to, such as counselors. And so there is a lot of hope that you can heal, you can grow, but if you don't get the help that you need, we do end up struggling with these problems for years and years and years. And going back to those 3 pitfalls, the third one I wanted to mention, just to finish that out, is putting your child in the middle. So this happens a lot when, again, mom and dad are frustrated at each other, not on speaking terms. And so the child can end up being the negotiator. They can be put in the middle to relay information back and forth from mom and dad. And this can be so anxiety provoking. I did it myself with my parents. It can be so anxiety provoking, so debilitating, so just horrible for the child. And so a few pointers here for everyone watching and listening. One, if you're relaying, simple information like logistical things from one parent to the other through the child, that's not the worst thing. It's not ideal, but it's not the worst thing. But any serious topics, serious arguments, serious discussions should never be had through the child. It's so devastating, so difficult for the child, because essentially, like you said, Peter, the child then get filled up with all this frustration, all these problems, and they end up carrying the burden that mom and dad are carrying as well, when it really shouldn't be their job to carry that. And so they shouldn't have to be in the middle. It's better, again, to find someone else will be in the middle, whether it's an attorney, a relative, a friend, whoever you can find. If you can't talk directly to your spouse, ideally you'd work to the point, at least for the sake of the children, to talk to each other, at least about logistical things, or have those discussions. But it can be so debilitating, so harmful to have your kid be in the middle, because they're not meant to be the negotiator.
I'm just going to give you a little tip, or everybody a little tip. You mentioned, using an attorney to be the middle person. That can get really, really expensive. And so you want to try to work things out, because otherwise you'll be paying for the rest of your life. Okay. So just
great tip. My parents had a 3-year-long divorce. It was really messy. They blew hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I totally see what you're saying there, and I've lived through that. And it's unfortunate too. Not that, I'm not really bitter at the fact that I don't get anything from mom or dad, but it is a reality for a lot of young people, is that so often mom and dad are at war with each other, and they end up spending money and resources on this fight that would normally go to the kids. And so it's just another sad reality.
Everybody says that. They go, you could have taken that money. I mean, and it could have gone toward you. Everybody says that. But when you're in the heat of battle, you don't have a choice. Like, I had to arm myself because I didn't want to go. I've never been in this situation, and I had to lawyer up because she was pissed just for being pissed. There wasn't, it just, again, I'm not he said, she said. You don't know. Everybody's got a side to the story, but lawyers are really expensive. And if you could look back at it and go, this was really a waste of money, because it was just adolescent, just bickering over nothing just because you're pissed. And that's the psyche of that whole, divorce.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right that sometimes you do have to lawyer up. You do need to spend the money. And sometimes you're just backed into a corner, right, Peter? You don't have a choice. Like you just have to get the lawyer. Maybe, your spouse files for divorce. You can't just represent yourself. And so you need something like that in those situations. And, I've dealt with families where the dad just ups and leaves with another woman. And so the mom, especially if maybe she was working part-time or a full-time mom at home, it can be so difficult for her to just get by because, maybe dad was the one bringing in the money and in the bills. And then now that he's gone, you obviously might need to rely on our legal system to get some money to take care of the kids. And that happens. I've seen those cases. And so, yeah, obviously it's ideal if you can not blow all that money, but it does happen. And it's really unfortunate on all counts.
That's another part that we'd have to come back because Pepsi's already flashing the clock at me. I mean, we've blown through a lot of time, and we still got a couple more things I want to go through. The thing is, real quick, what you're just talking about right now, that's part of the surviving divorce and single parenting, like after the fact, because single parent, it's hard to juggle unless you got family to pick up the slack and things like that. That's a whole nother show that maybe we can talk about, because I love talking about this stuff because it's factual. It's here and now, and it's not going away anytime soon. But I want to ask you real quick, and because then I want to talk about your book real fast and things and the podcast, but parent talks going wrong.
Yeah, a few quick and simple tips. So parents basically struggle, just kind of set the scene first. Parents struggle with knowing how much to divulge to their kids about the divorce. And they might feel like they're going to divulge too much or divulge, say too little. It can be challenging. It's hard to walk that line about telling your kids why you're getting divorced and what happened leading up to it and all of that. And so just a few tips. One, I would say keep it simple. Just tell your kids enough to satisfy their curiosity. So obviously when they're younger, they won't need much. It's going to be really painful and difficult for them, but just give them the truth, but you don't need to add all the details. For example, if your spouse cheated on you, maybe it's time to tell them that, but maybe it's not. Maybe you need to wait years down the road. And when you do that, even years down the road, there's no need to list out all of the sexual mistakes that your spouse made. I see parents making that mistake a lot. They just kind of dump everything onto their kids, and their kids are like, whoa, I never knew that about mom, or I never knew that about dad. And it can be really, really debilitating. So that's one. The second tip is related. Kind of act like a objective reporter. So, Peter, you do media. Act like you're just reporting on events in a way. Don't, when you're sharing this information about what's going on, just relay the information in somewhat of an unemotional way. That doesn't mean you don't need to show that you're affected by it. But just kind of relay the information, be objective, try to keep your emotions at bay, and just give them what they need to know. So that's the second tip. And then the third tip is make sure they know it's not their fault. So like the title of the book, so often us children feel like we're responsible for it, or maybe there was something we could have done to make it better to avoid the divorce. I know I felt that way with my parents. And so it's important that we hear from you, the parents, that it's not our fault. We didn't cause this. There's nothing that we could have done to prevent it. And there's sadly nothing we can do to fix it. There was a dad who reached out to me recently, and he said his wife is divorcing him. He doesn't want the divorce. But on the day that he was leaving the home, he was in their bathroom, just crying, really broken up. And his son came in and he looked at him and he said, Dad, is this my fault? And immediately, Dad gave him a big hug and just assured him, like, no, it's not your fault, son. And so we need to hear that, because for one reason or another, which we can get into maybe at a later point, we often blame ourselves, or at least feel responsible. So again, it's tough to toe that line, but with those, keep it simple, just relay information objectively, and then make sure they know it's not their fault when you're talking to your child about your divorce.
I mean, you're telling me I'm in media. Sometimes you have to be that objective reporter. It's like, this just in, your mother's a rotten whore. It's like, nah.
Probably not the best thing to say. Yeah.
Listen, Junior, this isn't, read the headlines. Extra, read all about it. Your mother's been cheating on me. Your father's a lousy. He can't keep his thing in his pants, or whatever. You don't want to. You don't want to do that.
Yeah, it sounds like our media today, but we gotta avoid that. And it's going to do a lot of damage on the kids if we let our emotions control, which is really hard not to let your emotions control you when you're in pain.
It's very hard, and picking and choosing, because again, when you get that emotion to push that verbiage out, it's just the gates open up, and sometimes your mouth speaks faster than your brain, and that's where the damage starts. Anyway, but again, we're running out of time. I want to talk to people. So your book, you wrote this book. How long ago did you write this book?
It's been out about a year.
About a year. This book is available. Let's do that too. I forgot. This book is available on Amazon.
Yep, available on Amazon. We're giving away the first chapters for free. You can get those at our website, which is Restored Ministry. Ministry is just singular, restoredministry.com/books. And you can get the free chapters on there. And there's also a button on there to buy the book on Amazon.
Let's put it up there. So this is how you can find anything that Joey Pontarelli's got to offer, guidance, the book. You also have a podcast, correct?
Yep. Yeah. On that podcast, we feature stories of young people who come from broken families, how it's affected them, what they've done to heal and deal with it. And then we also bring on experts on various topics, whether it's relationships or navigating emotions, all those things. So stories and experts that offer really practical advice on how to cope, how to heal from the trauma of your parents' divorce, ultimately with the goal of helping people thrive in life, just be healthy, whole, happy people. And so that's where we're there. And we try to make everything so simple so that people actually take action on it. And so if everyone wants to listen to it, I recommend episode 8, and you can find that anywhere you listen to podcasts. It's called Restored, Helping Children of Divorce. So just go to the website, restoredministry.com/divorce, or sorry, restoredministry.com/podcast.
How often are you doing these podcasts? Because I'm going to check your podcast out. I just haven't had time yet. We've been so busy, but how often do you do your podcasts?
Every other week we release a new episode.
Okay. And so if people subscribe to your podcast, they'll be notified every time you do a new podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you subscribe to our email list, which there's ways to do that on the website too, we notify you through email when a new episode goes live as well.
Okay. Wow. Is there anything you would like to leave everybody? I hate that we've gone through. I mean, this could be a 3-hour show, and I say that a lot, but I mean, this is, but we'll just have to have you back sometime next year, and we'll go into, because we're never going to reach everybody. And I say that, so we're always hitting new people, and again, for one that's healing, 5 are coming through the door. But is there anything before we let you go that if you had to say something to sum everything up, what would that be?
2 things. One, as parents, you play such a crucial role in helping mitigate the negative effects that come from divorce. And research has documented this very clearly. We're actually working on a new book about this and how divorce can be super debilitating to the children, but you can mitigate those effects by being a good mom, being a good dad. And so pursue your kids, spend time with them, love them, ask them how they're doing with all this. If you want to, you can even apologize for everything they've been through, maybe write them a letter. That's one thing I would say. And then the next thing, it's pretty unpopular in our culture, but I would say if you're in a situation where you're having struggles within marriage and maybe you're considering getting divorced, I would just encourage you to fight for your marriage. Now, obviously, it's not always possible to hold things together, and maybe your spouse is leaving you even though you don't want the marriage to fall apart. But if there's a chance, fight for your marriage. And we offer some resources on our website and in certain podcast episodes for marriages in crisis. And so one of the episodes, I don't remember the number, it was with Greg and Julie Alexander. They're from the Alexander House. They help really struggling spouses. And so you can Google the Alexander House, and they have coached over 5,000 couples, and their success rate is 98% at helping couples stay together. It's quite crazy. It's awesome. And so that would be my encouragement. Again, I'm not putting down people who've been divorced. I'm not here to judge or condemn. But if you're in a position where you can fight for your marriage and find a way, I would definitely encourage you to do that. But if you've been through that or that's inevitable, we're here to help you along the way. We're building resources for you and for your children to help them navigate these really difficult challenges that they face.
Well said. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to contact Joey Pontarelli and you want to see everything he has to offer, it's right there on the screen at www.restoredministry.com. And there he has his podcast available, the books, you have counseling available, you have referrals, you have all kinds of testimonials and things like that. I want to leave you with one thing. Just remember, it takes 2 to get married, and only one to get divorced. So you can
Amen.
try all you want to stay married, but if that other person does not want to stay married, you really don't have a choice in that matter. And it kind of sucks sometimes. But then again, why would you want to be married to somebody who doesn't want to be married to you?
Yeah, no, you're speaking truth. That's I think one of the most difficult parts of divorce. Like I said, I've had people reach out to me. I'm talking to a mom with 6 kids right now who say similar thing. Dad does not want to be married anymore, and she does, and it's just heartbreaking.
Yeah. Well, just all I can say is no matter what happens between you and your spouse, love your children. Period. End of story. You cannot love them enough. So because they are part of you and they are not going away. And I mean, unless you choose to, and then it's shame on you. I don't understand. And you definitely need to do this. Here I go. I'm getting the clock again, Mr. Clock Pusher. All right, ladies and gentlemen, last time I want to thank you, Joey Pontarelli, for being on the Peter G Show, Life with Peter G, and sharing some of this life experiencing and life-changing information. And I hope that people will contact you, and I hope that you'll be coming back on this show sometime, and we can do this again, because I don't think we could ever run out of things to talk about on this, because people need this. So thank you.
Couldn't agree more, Peter. Honored to be with you. Thanks so much, and we're here to serve anyone who needs the help. So feel free to reach out. Thanks so much for having me.
There you go. All right, there you go. I appreciate it, and again, I'll be talking to you soon. And thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
Okay. There you have it, folks. Well said. It's endless. But again, the big deal is if you had only known then what you possibly know now, it could be a game changer. And I hope that people, you don't have to be divorced or to watch these shows. And like last week's show with the dietitian, you don't have to be overweight or this and that to have information to, you get something, benefits out of everything. Speaking of benefits out of everything, let me just do that. Last shot. Contact Joey Pontarelli, www.restoredministry.com. He was right here on this show giving his heart to you guys because he cares. He didn't have to do this kind of stuff. There's tons of choices in the world, and he chose to take his negative and turn it into a positive, and hopefully for you too. Speaking of negative and positive, let's bring where are you? Hey there.
Hey, mindfulness.
Yeah.
What a breath of fresh air. Just to hear what he had to say. I mean, a lot of it makes sense and resonated with many of your viewers. I'm sure.
I think almost everybody can relate. Can relate to this because. Look, I mean, again, I was telling I was been throwing up all over you for years, and yeah, look what happened.
What happened? No, not true. But just mindfulness and what he had to say, just very, you can tell the man is smart, a lot of intellect, and he knows. So. Yes.
Unfortunately, sometimes you have to get drugged through the mud to get the understanding of the experience of what you know. And, I definitely wouldn't want to get pointers from somebody who, never really felt the depth of it. I mean, that's kind of I don't know. To me, it's like, that's why, you see people like drug counselors were prior drug addicts. I mean, they've been there, done that, so it's,
got the t-shirt.
Yeah, got the t-shirt. Yeah, there you go. So that's the thing. It's sad that you had to go through it to understand, to like, okay, I know I did this, but it isn't the path to go. But this is where we're at,
Right, but what great information, right? And I mean, this is where your show started too. And
this
pretty
where
much,
the
right?
show started.
So.
I was bitching about everything because I was just so tired of the nonsense. And it was eating at it eats at you because it's daily, and it takes a toll on you. And you're witness to it. Look at me now. I had long, flowing, dark hair.
Yeah, that was back. But anyway.
Yeah, that was back in the day.
Yeah. Anyway, I love you, man. I love you.
There you go.
I love you.
You got a good joke. Well, by all means, please take it because
no. It's all good. What a great show. Yeah, Mr. Joey Pontarelli. Yeah, it's not your fault. Good stuff. Good stuff tonight.
It's not your
Mindfulness.
fault. It's not your fault. Buy his book. Maybe you'll get, again, it's a very, very inexpensive investment in your life to be a better person more than, again, it's just one small step. I'm constantly trying to change things that not necessarily that I was bad, but things to make it to where I'm more at peace with myself now.
You got to forgive yourself, and it's all in his book. Not your fault. Not your fault.
I know, but
Right.
a lot of times I'm bitching
And that's for the
about
kids too. But right, and his message, it flows through, right, through everybody, right.
I know, but I'm always bitching at you on the phone, and you're going like, why are you
Oh, yeah.
worrying about something that hasn't even happened yet? And it's like, ooh, ooh.
Oh, no.
You are so right, but
Great.
habits are hard to break. It's just hard things. When you get pounded continually, it's just like if you're being told you're stupid all your life and you're really not. Try to break that.
Right. Well, that's, again, that's mindfulness, and that's, again, that's a whole nother topic for another show.
Maybe
But,
people can go to Tai Chi in the park with you and just let it all out.
Transcendental meditation, yes.
Yes, yeah.
But, mindfulness. But Mr. Joey, he talked a lot about that, mindfulness, whether he knows it or not, and it's really a true story. So,
I think he knows it. I'm glad. I'm telling you, this show almost didn't come to be because it was just a hard back and forth, and I do believe things happen for a reason, and I'm so glad that it happened because, again, this is some of the stuff that's closest to my heart. I don't like making a continual habit like week after week, but I believe it's knowledge that needs to be shared for the sake of human, humankind.
Correct.
Period.
Correct. Everything happens for a reason, and we're all connected. And namaste.
Okay. Speaking of being connected, you and I are going to be connected for a full show next week. I hope you're brushing up on your chops.
Yeah, baby.
Yeah, I got a bunch of video stuff. I got a bunch of stuff. We're going to be talking about. Speaking of parenting, I got a bunch of videos on how parents raise their children and what they don't know. And it's like, son of a gun. And this is the blame, when we're going to get into millennials and all that kind of stuff, because there's a lot of kids out there that don't know a freaking thing, and except all the stuff they don't need to know. And it's pretty sad. And this is our generations coming up. And I think this is a lot about the mess we're in right now too, because they don't know nothing, they don't care about nothing. And I'm gonna show you it, in videos next week, as well as we'll talk about some other things. But
it's gonna be a good show. So
just gonna be you. That's right. Next week is current events. So we're gonna be bitching. That's right. I'll be bitching about the month-long things that go on. In fact, again, I'm gathering too much material, and it could be a weekly thing the way life is going. But we'll try to narrow it down to an hour and 15 minutes or so. Meanwhile, this show once again went over, and that's life, and I don't care because it was worth it. So, anything else you want to leave everybody with, Pepsi? Oh, I forgot.
Namaste. Who loves you?
Who loves you?
Always be kind.
Always be kind. Pepsi says, wait a minute, let's give you a solo here. There you go. Take the wheel, Pepsi.
Namaste. Always be kind. Who loves you?
Who loves you? That's a good question. Anyway. All right. I'll let you let me finish up with the last 2 minutes here, and then we'll talk after the show, okay?
Yeah, I got it.
There you go. Oh, throwing the keyboard. Yeah, that's like saying, look how busy I am. All right, I'll talk to you in a minute. There you go. Let's all just take a breath real quick. Smooth. Ow! I watched that old Jackie Gleason movie on how he became Jackie Gleason. It's like, ow, smooth, and the old how sweet it is. Anyway, I want to thank everybody for paying attention, for watching the show. I hope you got something out of it. If you have comments, things you want to talk about, you want me to talk about, don't forget, you can always write into the show. You can go to the email, or you want to be a guest on the show, just info@petergshow.com. If you got something of worth, tell me you think I suck, or, you got suggestions, because everybody seems to know more than I do. I'm just the show host. I'm the middleman. But don't be shy, especially if you want to be a guest. You got something you want to bring to the table. Just let us know. info@petergshow.com. It's real simple. It's that easy. And don't forget, one last chance. Not last chance for this show, but if you don't have the time to watch the show, take it on the road with you. You can go on Apple Podcast or just Google the Peter G Show podcast, and you got your Amazon podcast, your Spotify. We're on 25 different platforms now, so take your pick. But put the show in your ear, and the information you get, I promise you, is well worth it. I appreciate those who will sit down and take the time to watch, but not everybody can do that, and I get it. But I love you for the ones that are doing it. And if you're checking out, believe me, the podcasts are growing. We're even in China now. We're in China. Yeah, we're hey, Pepsi. Yeah, we're in China now. We are. So God bless those three that are in, yeah, it all starts with one. But we are in China, Bulgaria, Romania, Canada, Mexico,
Ukraine.
You insane in the membrane, Holy moly. Yeah, he gets a kick out of that stuff. He's easily amused, folks. Anyway, I love you for watching. But check out the podcast if you can too. Next week we'll be here, God willing. Anything I've forgotten? No. Oh God. I want to thank again Joey Pontarelli for being here, and I gotta have a long talk again. I apologize for the delay tonight, folks. It was one of those weirdest oopses in my show, Peter G Show, Life of Peter G Show career, just forgetting to set something, and it totally threw me off. And I don't even have to tell you this, but I am telling you this is because we're all just human. We're just doing what we do, and I love doing this for you. So my last words before we leave, as always, as Pepsi said, be kind. You don't have to take any shit from anybody, but you don't have to be an ass either. Life is short. It's getting shorter. So make the best of it, all right? I'm Peter G. You're watching Life of Peter G, the Peter G Show, every Wednesday like clockwork, 6 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Central, and 9 p.m. on the East Coast, right here, every Wednesday. I love you guys. Peace out.
Peter G Show, Peter G Show, Divorce Dad.